Performance every Friday at 11 a.m. Glad to be here. It's kind of a twisty day. That's part of our theme for today. We've got a great show, but at the same time, it's a show about thinking a little bit. If you can see, if you're watching me today, you look over my shoulder and you see that I have a graphic up there with our theme, Sports Mental Health Responsibility. What is sports mental health responsibility? And my question is, when should the coaches call the therapists? When should they be called? And if you notice, the pictures on my screen are some people you might recognize from this Olympics. It's the 2020 Olympics in 2021 over in Tokyo, Japan. And you have some things that have been happening, a lot of different things, before we even got to Simone Biles and her issues with just her mental capacity, her awareness, her being able to identify where she is at in the air. So I use the term twisties, which is one that they use as gymnasts. They know that the twisties are a moment in time when they have difficulty spotting up. Where are they in that movement? And then where are they to land, safely land? We don't always tend to look at gymnastics as a dangerous sport, but it is. It is one that puts the athlete at risk in being able to perform their given routine in a way that not only takes advantage of their excellence as athletes, but also allows them to stay safe. And we're here today to talk about that. Other athletes that have been noted to have issues with their mental health are Naomi Osaka. Naomi's a tennis player, very talented young woman, not just as a tennis player, as a business person, as a fashionista, as an icon. Many of the athletes we see out in the world, their image is a big part of who they are, not just the sport that they perform in. So as we look at that aspect of the athlete, we take a look at what is their mindset. Well, this week I picked out a mindset moment befitting of today's topic on the show, a quote from Ken Robinson. And Ken Robinson was a noted leadership person. He's no longer with us, but in his life he spent a lot of time looking at processes and creativity. So I used this quote today for the mindset moment of the week. Creativity is the process of having original ideas, not unlike athletes, like Simone Biles, like Naomi Osaka, that have original ideas that have value. And it is a process. It's not random. That creativity is a process that they rely on to get them to an end result that is just phenomenal. I mean, the things that Simone Biles does with her body in very short moments in time, with power and grace, with the end result, the prescribed outcomes of that effort, are captured in this quote by Ken Robinson, an author and educator. I'll say it again. Creativity is the process of having original ideas that have value. It is a process. It's not random. Now, as I say that, let's think about this for a minute. What kind of imagination do you need to have to take you anywhere you want to go? And again, the athletes I'm going to showcase today in our conversation is anywhere and everywhere. Imagination, when you imagine it, you create a vision for yourself, and you're able to execute it because your body, your mind, everything that goes into preparing yourself to execute that process has been imagined. So we come up with this quote from Aristotle. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, it's a habit. We are what we repeatedly do. So then excellence is not an act, it is a habit. It requires your imagination to get you started down that road of repeated activity so that you can excel and that excellence is not an act, and it creates a habit for you. If you watched any of the Olympics, any of the events, everything from ping pong, table tennis, golf, equestrian, you watch them perform, you should have an appreciation like you do when you watch Simone Biles execute a floor exercise or a balance beam. Do you realize that on a balance beam it's 4 inches of hardwood that they are spinning and jumping and doing handstands on, doing flips over this and landing on that 4-inch piece of wood? Let me emphasize hardwood. I've been around those apparatus, and I've seen and felt what they look like and what they feel like. It is imperative that your imagination takes you to the place that you need to go to be able to deliver that excellence through the habits that you create. I have shared this picture many times before, and spoken to you as my audience about this wonderful prima ballerina. I'm not going to focus on her as much as I am her form and the excellence it takes through her imagination to get her to that place. Now, she's aided in her imaginary states with music and stories that she performs on stage. And with that imagination, she needs to have a plan to recover to get to the next performance and the next one after that. So her body and her shape is one of being self-aware. So part of her delivery as well as her recovery to the next moment in time requires that she is self-aware. Christy is one of many athletes that excel because of her love of her sport, and in this case her art as well. But because she's really good at managing herself, having a plan, having a set of goals to get her there, she's also able to determine what that end result is going to be, that prescribed result for herself. Today she was featured on a CNN in reflecting the release of the entertainer known as Prince, in the release of an album from his library, the archive. He had recorded this album and then put it to the side. It's interesting that in the release, many of the songs and their lyrics, he self-determined. He imagined what the end would be, and it's coming out now at a time when we need those lyrics even more. And the Purple Family, which includes Christy, with Prince, talks about social awareness and managing ourselves so that we can be part of our own determination of what we want to be. So I want to make that note as we also talk about today the imagination it takes to execute the moves that not only a prima ballerina needs to execute, but an elite athlete like Simone Biles or Naomi Osaka and others that are performing during the Olympics. It makes me think a bit about what it takes, but more importantly, it takes as an athlete to deliver, but more importantly, what it takes to maintain that, to be self-aware and self-managed. But when the stressors come up, man, it boggles the mind. My stressors are little, small, insignificant in comparison to the issues Simone Biles and others deal with on a daily basis. But I'm just curious about what do we need to do to manage the stressors before it gets to failure? Before Simone Biles is facing the anxiety and the stressors related to not delivering the execution of that particular move And if she doesn't deliver, she's in midair. And she's realizing, I'm not seeing it. I'm not finding my spot. And when she has that fear in the moment, that's difficult to address. So managing the stress before failure is where I want to take us right now. Athletes are faced with stressors that create fear. And regretfully, if it's extended to full execution, in the midst of that fear, you might actually have some pain and a problem of executing that move. Once you come out of that, the athlete, the competitive spirit, is faced with frustration and anger because of that failure. And that's compounded by the emotions of the depression that are there. I mean, on one hand, you're an elite athlete. You know what you can do. You know you are a champion. Your history of performing has indicated you are a champion. And it's interesting, the dichotomy of that struggle within yourself. If you have ever felt that, you know what difficulty that creates for an athlete, or for anybody, even if you're not an athlete. An elite performer in the corporate world, an elite performer in music and art and drama. You're trying to deliver a specified set of outcomes. I'm asking you, what can we do to manage our stressors so that we do not get to failure? We address it before failure even happens. It seems like a sense of urgency when it comes down to someone like an Olympic athlete, where if we don't address the stress before failure and failure happens, it could be detrimental to your future. You could be injured to a point where you don't get to perform again. You don't get to excel to the ends of perfection and get the gold medal, or any medal, or any outcome that seems satisfactory. So I want to manage the stress so that we don't have athletes sitting alone on a bench, hunched over, waiting for outcomes, or that they seclude themselves in darkness, don't make eye contact. They don't recognize who they are or what they're doing, and they question whether or not they want to ever perform again. Like Naomi Osaka at a recent tennis tournament, the mandate at the tournament in Australia was that you had to go to the press. Well, press is one of her triggers. Does her team know that? Are they prepared to manage her stresses before she gets to failure? In that particular instance, no, that wasn't the case. Failure happened. She was embarrassed, compounding the stressors, compounding the possibility for depression and anxiety to sit in. The same thing being true for Simone Biles. Now, the difference with Simone is her team, her support group was there for her. Her teammates were there for her. Look, it doesn't diminish the outcome to her personally. She still felt it. But she was bowed up by her teammates and her coaches. In fact, the whole Olympic community, because they were aware of it. Now, I'll pause a moment and I question whether or not the Olympic community in its entirety as a system allowed her a space. I provide and recommend to organizations at the college and professional level that they create environmental space for quiet rooms. I'm hoping the Olympic Village, where the athletes were staying, allowed her, maybe the arenas as well, allowed Simone and other athletes quiet space, an environment that they could go to where they could gather themselves up. Now, one of the examples that's part of the routine in swimming and diving is that they have these warm pools, they have showers, they have these little pieces of space that you can kind of go within yourself. You're away from the press, you're away from the other athletes. You can kind of consolidate yourself into this space and perhaps calm yourself down. Now, I'm saying this with presumption that athletes are given instruction, training, coaching about what to do in that space, breathing techniques, making sure that you're moving your eyes around, you're seeing other things, you're aware of other shapes, colors, people, sounds in that space to allow you to find yourself in that space so that you know what your triggers are in that space, and you know how to manage those triggers because of your self-awareness. It's really interesting to me what we don't say as coaches, administrators, sports management folks of the space that these events are taking place in. I'll share a brief story with you about an Olympic-bound athlete. He did not make it, but he went on to, he is into other higher levels of performance in his sport of being a wrestler. And in his process of striving to be an Olympian, he came to me and said, I have a problem. The closer and closer I get to an event, the more and more the world closes in on me. And I said, well, what does that mean, the world closes in on you? What it meant was that literally in his vision, his scope of vision, began to close down to the point where he got, all he could see was this circle of light and the images that would go in there. He had these black visions that come in. So his stressors, his anxiety was so high from a number of different sources. Anxiety from performance anxiety. I want to perform to my best. Puts pressure on himself. Then the triggers became the environment, getting closer to the locker room, getting closer to the event building itself, the arena. And then as he's in the locker room, not seeing certain things that were familiar so that the anxiety would diminish. It got bigger. And eventually, by the time he got to the mat, all he saw was almost a $50 size of light and images. And yet, in NCAA ranking, at the time, he was ranked 5th in his weight class nationally as an NCAA wrestler. His coaches didn't understand, didn't even know about what was happening to his mind, his vision, his habits at home, was trying to sleep, nutritional stuff, his communication skills. So we evaluated together what his triggers were and how to get him not only more self-aware, but also knowing what he could do to control his self-awareness. Here are some examples. When you're in this world, like I'm right now, I'm in the studio, and I'm seeing all these different things. I'm putting myself, actually, as I'm explaining it to you, into a more self-aware space. I see shapes on the wall, the sound dampening things that are on the wall. I see the colors on the screens in front of me, the keyboards, the notes, the pen in front of me, so that I know my space. I'm familiar with my space. I would say this to him as well. I'd say, let's take a walk. Because it takes a village. It takes me and you and your family, your teammates, to be aware of what's essential for you to be in the space, self-aware, so that you are able to control that space. So when he and I took walks, and he was from Arizona, we would look at pine trees. We would look at the sidewalk, the road, gardens of homes around you. Well, the first thing I said to him, because there were pine trees nearby, I'd say, what does that pine tree look like? We'd stopped on our walk, and I said, take a look at that pine tree. What is that? What do you see? First thing he said was the color, green. It's green. Great. Go deeper. What else do you see? Tell me what else you see. Oh, I see the needles. How many needles do you see? A lot. I see a lot of needles. And then he saw a pine cone within the midst of that greenness. Then he saw a different colored pine cone. Some that were mature, they were brown, perhaps ready to fall off the branches. And then he saw the green ones, the new ones that were coming. I said, okay, hold on a minute, let's pause. Have you ever noticed that before? He said, I might have, but I never really paid attention to it. Well, how does that make you feel? He says, I feel calmer already. I'm aware of those other things. And because I'm aware of that, I move away from the stressors. I move away from even identifying the triggers that cause me to stress. And then we started talking about his plan and his team's plan, how he wanted to incorporate his team into his plan so that he could diminish, if not remove, his fear, his anger, even the pain he felt in his body that he didn't recognize was there because of the stressors. These are activities that I ask all athletes to do as a means to manage the stressors before it becomes part of the failure, the physical failure that you feel. We know from the Olympic reports on Simone Biles that she has avoided getting to really cataclysmic injury possibilities with not managing those triggers. She caught those triggers because they've happened to her before. The twisties, as they call them, have taken up to 2 weeks for her to manage and recover from. I'm wondering, and look, I don't want people to misunderstand me here. I am not trying to say that I'm putting in place strategies and methods to get any athlete back to performing at their level quickly or too quickly. I am saying that we need to manage the stressors so that the athletes can make a choice as to when they continue their performance excellence. If we look at the stressors and the triggers more often in a self-aware way, Simone Biles is not only able to stay more in control, but she's able to keep it in perspective that so she can continue to perform at her best, because ultimately that's what she wants to do. I'm asking that she gets a choice to do it on her terms, and that she shares that awareness and what those triggers are with her team so that they have a plan on how to support her. Because the one thing you don't want to have happen is you find anybody, athlete, executive, family member, whomever it might be, sitting in the dark, not able to interact. That's signs of failure, mental and physical failure. We don't want it to get to that place. If you've ever been at that place, you know what it feels like. And you don't want to be in that place. It's not a comfortable place to be. So now I'm asking you to know the signs. And some of them are very self-evident. You've seen them. You've probably been around people that you've walked by casually in a sporting event as an athlete and teammate. And you saw the signs, but you didn't say anything, or you didn't offer your assistance. And offering doesn't mean they're accepted. I want to make sure I say that, because many times the athlete who's in this space is having a hard time. That's why they're sitting alone. That's why they're in the dark. That's why they're also avoiding any eye contact. They're having a difficult time managing the triggers and the stressors that came with it. We also know with these signs, they are in the failure mode. Hopefully they're not in so much degree of failure in managing the demons they're facing that it's caused any kind of physical injury. It's most definitely emotional distress, and they're trying to discover ways to manage that emotion. Another sign is when they're asked, and if you see the signs, like those first two signs, you see those first two signs and you approach them, know that you might get a little pushback. They may be agitated when you ask them questions. In fact, in some cases, they're sitting in that failure for so long, it could in fact be anger. So how do we manage that? Things have happened. Changes have occurred. And I'm using the Olympics, the 2020, but now in 2021 Olympics in Tokyo. Major changes over a year ago. And before that, the athletes in preparation for the 2020 Olympics were preparing in 2019. And then the triggers that many of them, none of us faced, was COVID. It was a huge trigger for most of us, to varying degrees of stress and pressure. But nonetheless, when it comes to Olympic athletes and even professional athletes, because in 2019 we had the NBA, the NFL, soccer, any volleyball, any number of of professional and amateur sports that were preparing. In 2019, in March of 2019, what happened to the NCAA? Basketball, March Madness, was shut down. Lots of frustration, lots of emotional outbursts that were triggered because of COVID. Senior athletes, male and female basketball players, were not able to be seen in that arena to perform at their best. Some teams, first time in years that their college was able to go to the NCAA tournaments, those were triggered by COVID. So I felt it was appropriate that the Olympic rings with the word Tokyo and 2020 with the zero slashed out was a very memorable, if not effective, metaphor and emblem for identifying the changes. And in these changes, if you're part of an organizational structure or you're a leader within that structure, we need to provide guidance for finding the support that people need through that change. Here it is. You make your calls, you send your emails, you notify people, oh, we've got COVID, here's where it's at, these are the forces that are asking us to deal with this. And it's, it's federal government, it's international global health organizations, WHO, and then the CDC here in the United States and the FDA. It's all these things came into play and forced us to have to look at this major, major change. So in the communication of that change, that's when you could be triggered to that management side of the stressors. Be aware. Stay in your training routines. Be aware in those training routines that you're still preparing, maybe not the same aggressive pace because now it's not 2020 perhaps, and you're training in 2019, but you're doing it so that you're prepared for what is coming. That uncertainty, that creates a lot of fear for people. It's really extraordinary what we have to face in these moments. Now, as I say that, I'm reminded that I am so grateful for the people and things that are in my world. People and things like KUHSdenver.com and the streaming that we do here every day, almost every hour of every day. Pushing our message out there about being aware of what's coming. The next song that's on the list for the day. The next talk show host that's coming in to share what they have to share. And addressing uncertainties. Gosh, I hope I don't create fear. I do address uncertainty. But there's a lot of things that we have to be aware of that will create a trigger in you that may emote some things from you. And I'm hoping it's not fear. And I hope we're doing it in advance to the fear. That we're managing those stressors so that it doesn't become harmful to you in a physical or emotional way. So that as we do that, as we do here at KUHS, we share with you methods, in this case, in today's session, on the twisties. That's our theme for today, because it was an appropriate term that Simone Biles and her teammates deal with routinely, and Simone, it raised its ugly head. I'm hoping that in the future, with that example, that we're able to share today some strategies on how you can manage it before it becomes failure for you. And by sharing methods for healing an athlete's dealing with those stressors so that they can control the outcomes before it gets to failure. That's what I'm hoping it is for you. And we showed that, the twisties is the term that the gymnasts use for them. And Simone Biles, she is, the level of difficulty that she uses, most of the tricks that the athletes in the gymnastics world use for level of difficulty is in the 5 range. This professional woman, 6.0 in many of her tricks. And most, well, I shouldn't say most, to a great degree, she created them. the tricks that she performs, the ones that are named after her, many a gymnast are not even trying them because they're so difficult, and they're off the range. And that's a testament to Simone. She created them because she was capable of doing them. But she's fallible, as is evidence to the things that she's going through. Maybe it's her body telling her, take a breath, take a moment, get it under control, and move forward from there. Now, Simone has her limitations, just like we all do. And in the mental side of things, physically, we know from her performances she is primo. She prepares her body to the level it needs to be prepared to let her mind then execute with that superior performance of her body the tricks that she wants it to do. But when she asks her body to do certain things, she puts it into a state that maybe there's moments where her body is just, her brain is overwhelmed. Now, I'm trying to gauge this in, because twisties require, well, the lack of twisties, you've got to see things. So that as she's twisting in the air, her eyes have to be picking up certain spots. If they're not, my contention is there are forces working on Simone's brain that are not necessarily part of the sport, because she has practiced so much to get to that excellence, like the Aristotle quote, perfection, excellence, it's a habit because you've practiced it. So if she's feeling the twisties, more than likely there's other forces working on Simone that aren't part of her physicality. It could be the pressures of the sport outside of the arena. It could be Simone herself with high expectations, and that she needs to have moments to decompress, and yet she's not given that because the environment's not allowing for that to happen. Like I mentioned earlier, are there spaces where athletes like Simone can go to decompress, to get more awareness, to take the walk and see the pine needles, the pine cones, distract herself so that when she then goes into those physical settings and her brain is asking her body to deliver, she's clearly ready to do that. I'm not there. I'm not at the Olympics. I don't know if when Simone gets back into twisting off of the springboard for the pommel horse, sorry, not pommel horse, the springboard, or she's doing her floor exercises, or she's on the uneven parallel bars, that she's able to be in that space and see what is necessary to deliver a landing that doesn't scare her. In this last picture, when she vaulted, the landing, you could see in her face, she was not confident. She was not balanced. One side of her body was not landing in the same place as the other side of the body, so it was not a very good landing. And that's a sign that things are not necessarily in the right place at the right time. They call them twisties. It's interesting, but yet it resonates with me that she is definitely having difficulty. So as I say that about the twisties, we want to take a look at what are the signs based on reflecting and comparing to prescribed outcomes. In the moments before Simone made a decision a few days ago, about 2 or 3 days ago, that she was going to take a break, take a moment, she saw and felt the difference between what happened and her vision of prescribed outcomes. She knew it wasn't right. The images didn't match up with her vision and the feeling of those visions and what it should feel like. Now, the obvious to the audience, to coaches, to teammates, is Simone did not look in control. That's prescribed outcome, right? And then once she moved away from the mat and that landing, or the image of her twisting and what she looked like in the air, to many people, until she said something, they were not probably aware of how emotional and out of control she was. How emotional failure was the key sign. So until she felt confident being able to speak out, nobody really knew. Now, her teammates might have, but they were going to wait. In honoring Simone, they were going to wait before they said anything. And I'm pretty confident that there were some conversations with teammates that are very close to her, like Childs. She's very close to her. I'm sure that there may have been some sharing between the two of them. And then eventually, in her own good time, Simone shared with her teammates so that she could have a chance to bring that wonderful championship gold medal smile to everybody. Oh gosh, I'm struggling here because I deal with this all the time. I'm very active, proactive in managing the stressors before it gets to failure, creating the environments, identifying the self-awareness, the self-management, to get to self-assurance that you're in control, that you own and can identify the triggers as an athlete. Simone identified the triggers. I think we'll wait and see if she's going to be able to manage those emotions in a self-managed way, because she's self-aware, and we'll know that when she makes a statement about the individual events and whether or not she's going to perform in those individual events. So we'll wait and see, right? The all-around is done. USA got a gold in the all-around. It makes me feel really confident that I'm on the right path when I see the results of individual athletes performing at a high level in the midst of adversity for another teammate. Because that teammate could have helped by going over to Simone and gathering in the emotions that Simone had and made them her own, to her own detriment. But instead, you're seeing a team of athletes and coaches come together, share, be aware, and then self-manage their own awareness so that they can then go forward and deliver their performance without being encumbered, without taking ownership of Simone's emotions, because Simone didn't ask them to. She shared with them how confident she was in managing her own situation so that her teammates could go forward and perform at their best level. In fact, maybe even be enriched by the toughness and the camaraderie and the sharing that Simone was giving them, and they then use that to enhance their execution, their self-management, and being able to control the triggers for themselves and the emotions that brought with it. Because ultimately, here's the bottom line. Simone is always a champion. She's got more than enough hardware to justify her standing tall, smiling that gold medal smile, and assuring everybody she's still a champion. Here's what we need to do. As I'm sure her teammates did, in their behavior backing this statement up, sharing positive affirmations to Simone, to her directly, but also positive affirmations through your own actions. Your own performance in the all-around performance to earn the gold medal for Team USA and yourself. In addition to the affirmations that you would share with Simone, recognizing through your words and your behaviors that Simone can see and say, she believes in me, she's got my back, I feel better about myself because of that. Every experience you have in the interactions with someone else, your own personal experiences, when you visualize what you can do, share that experience with Simone. So if you're a coach to Simone, give her the visualizations that are self-affirming. on the experiences that she's had in the past. Simone, you've been a gold medalist. You know what that looks like. You know what that feels like. Put yourself back in that space. Provide yourself confidence through that visualization that you are indeed a champion and will always be a champion. Self-visualization, it's called the positive self-talk, where you're talking to yourself internally with those visions, as well as maybe even just rolling a tape of audio affirmations to yourself. But round that out with a visualization, an image of affirmation that you are truly a champion. Now, as a group, as a team, as an administration, as sports management professionals, make sure that you create environments that allow people to surround themselves with trust and inclusion. If you've noticed anything about the images you saw of the Olympic gymnastics team, Simone was there. She was on the sidelines. She was cheering her teammates on. During the all-arounds, she was up in the stands, removing herself. I believe she did that to remove herself so that she could be in a space to self-affirm, self-manage, be self-aware, without being a distraction. That was allowed her. More than likely, they talked about it as a team, or coaches may have shared with Simone recommendations about go off on your own, find your own space, let us know where you are so we can reconnect and we can be inclusive when you want us to be inclusive. So it's important to surround athletes with people and things they can trust and that give them a sense of inclusion. Don't isolate them. Don't let them feed that darkness, that shrouded image, hunched shoulders, away from everybody and in a dark space. Don't let that happen. But my advice to you is let it happen and promote it to happen in good time, so the athlete feels that they've made the right choice. They are taking ownership of it. If they don't take ownership of it, anything you say or do with them may not be received as quickly or as efficiently as they could be. This is a tough one because the timing of owning future plans, like what Simone Biles is faced with this week, she's going to need to make a decision in the not too distant future of whether she's going to include herself in individual event participation. And she's got several that she could win gold. I'm hoping that she's not dwelling on the woulda, shoulda, couldas. She needs to dwell on plans for the future that she can control and that she will own, and that people will respect that ownership. Too often in my past, I've dealt with coaches who have forced athletes through almost intimidation routines. Well, you've been a champion before. Why do you want to cheat yourself from being a champion today? Suck it up. Be what you can be right now. This moment is yours. That's all great words to a certain degree, but not in these settings. Simone and other athletes that are fighting those demons, that are drawing them down into the darkness, that shrouded, alone darkness that doesn't allow them to make eye contact with you, that doesn't create situations or circumstances that a smile readily comes to their face. You don't want that rhetoric from the coaches. You want them to be supported by coaches and teammates that respect their ownership in the right time to their future plans. Simone has a timeline. It's coming. Not every athlete has a distinct timeline to have to face. It's a tough decision. It takes courage, and it takes a team environment that's going to help them focus in on what's good for them at that moment in that space. Now, as I say that, I'm reminded of what's coming up in the not too distant future. We've got the Olympics, so they'll be ending here soon with all the different events that are happening. We've got some great things that have happened in the Olympics, some wonderful, wonderful moments that could be distractions for in that awareness, that seeking awareness that I've advised that Simone and other athletes should do. The surfing, first time, we've got a gold medal, female gold medalist for the USA in surfing. Awesome. Overcome with emotion. Wonderful, wonderful opportunity. We also have Moments in skateboarding with youngsters. These are great images to reflect on and to distract, if you will, in your awareness for yourself, to take you away and yet bring you back through those visualizations and that excitement from other people. I'm hoping that we have some medalists in our golf. We've got some powerhouse golfers, but it just seems that we're not connecting. But even with that and that awareness, you can be distracted into places that are helpful to you to find your sense of control and your ownership of future plans. Well, in addition to the Olympic events that are coming, that we can revel in the greatness of that, we have some things coming up in the not too distant future. We got football coming back. We've got the professional teams are in camps. The college teams will be starting two-a-days in not too distant future, in the next few days actually. Last week there were conference meetings across the country for NCAA football. They get together, at a designated place. I think the Mountain West is still doing Las Vegas as their meeting place. But all the conferences meet together to talk about the season, the schedule, the captains that have been identified for this season, go out there and talk about expectations and their positive affirmations, their visualizations, and looking at what needs to happen. The pros are out there throwing the ball around because now it's mandatory practices are here. We'll be not too distant, like next couple of weeks, we're going to be having exhibition games, the non-conference kind of stuff happening, all in light of things we need to be aware of and creating an anticipation for future change. The D variant that's out there for COVID is causing a lot of people to be sensitive to this. Look at whether you're an athlete or an executive or a small business owner, we need to be aware of what future changes might be coming. Plan today for that inevitability and create your plan. So whether you're Simone Biles in the immediacy of what she's doing or you're a small business owner looking at the future, be aware of what needs to happen and stay on task. Like we do here, streaming every single week, every day, every moment of every day. Streaming at KUHS Denver, bringing you the best of the best that we can join with you on. I anticipated a colleague of mine, I'm going to give her some props, Dr. Leslie Rogers. I discovered something that's really awesome. So be aware that the Clubhouse is out there. It's part of the social media genre. You have to be invited into Clubhouse. I'm participating in that networking of colleagues, and I met Dr. Leslie Rogers. Just take a Google search on Dr. Leslie Rogers. She's a clinical psychologist that has had experience with the FBI on profiling. She's just a wonderful resource for me. I'm looking forward to my interactions with her, not only on the Clubhouse, but hopefully getting her on the show to talk about what we're talking about today. In more specific terms, we've got first responders, military personnel, we've got firefighters, police officers, nurses, doctors that are still going to be facing these uncertain times that are coming. I've got family members as executives in hospital healthcare in the state of Missouri, which is facing some just amazing increases in COVID cases. I can't say enough about being aware of who you are and the science that is so profound and so revealing. It doesn't take much. You don't have to be a scientist to understand what it means to wash your hands, have distance, cover your mouth if you cough or sneeze. And you may not have COVID. That's just being kind and courteous to others around you. Be aware of your space. So whether that awareness is on the Olympic scene and you're trying to manage yourself in that space, or it's just walking in the grocery store and you sneeze, cover your face. Maybe wear a mask, because now we're talking about with the variant, the D variant that's out there, we're saying, look, if you're going to go, if you anticipate, if you are aware, self-manage in that space and visualize what it's going to be like at King Soopers on a grocery shopping day. have a mask in your pocket. And if you go in, you go, oh, pretty busy day here. Better put my mask on. Even if you've been vaccinated, which I hope you have. Look, the science says this. The vaccinations work. They are working. And if you happen to come up with the thought that in your awareness search, in your visualizations of the conditions of your health care, that you say, well, the FDA hasn't come out and da-da-da-da. That is true. They have not come out. But also understand the science of the vaccines has been tested from other diseases prior to COVID, that it works. The mRNA process of delivering the COVID vaccine into our bodies is tested and tested true, has been approved by the FDA in other vaccine scenarios. It is coming. The FDA will put their rubber stamp on, but they have, in a sense, or it wouldn't have ever got onto the streets to be able to be used in the settings being used. So look at the science. Use it as a confidence builder for yourself and go out there and get vaccinated. And if you don't get vaccinated, follow the science and visualize conditions where you may go into a place where you like to hang out for coffee, for beverages, for maybe going to see a club act or a concert. Make sure that you're wearing a mask. Make sure that you're honoring others around you, even if you've been vaccinated. You could be asymptomatic and share it with someone else, not having the ill effects on yourself. Know the science. Be aware of what's going on in your world. So in summary, in the last few minutes of the show today, let me share with you how important it is that at 360 Performance, we deliver information to you so that you can make choices. Today it was about twisties and Olympic team excellence through Simone Biles. And excellence not only on the mats and the bars and the vault, but excellence just in her behavior as a conscientious teammate and performer of herself. I marvel at that, because it's so often tough for athletes to fight that competitive spirit that they have and do what is right for them in that moment. And Simone, my hat's off to you. My compliments are to you, because you shut it down before it got to a point where it was going to be really damaging to you. And I believe that you shut it off in a moment where you could share your emotional struggle, your physical and emotional struggle with the twisties, with your teammates, and be even more of a leader than you already are. That is outstanding. I believe if you feel comfortable with it, that you and your teammates should share how much of a guiding light, a leadership of self-management you were to your teammates that might have emboldened them to even strive for more. And then that contributed to gold medal performances for them in the all-around. I think it's outstanding. And I hope for the best, whatever that is for you, and that you choose the best. And if by choosing it, it becomes you do a floor X, but you don't do the vault, or you do the floor X and uneven bars, that would be awesome. But that's your choice that I will respect, and I hope that others will respect it for you, and use it as an exemplar for the future to other athletes, so that they know how to control their emotions, be self-managed, be self-aware, and take that going forward as a professional in your world beyond sports and what you do, and that we become better as administrators, management of spaces, coaches of athletes, in being aware of what are the triggers so that we can help manage it before it gets to failure. That's important. And allowing that awareness to stop us as coaches and administrators from pushing. Our encouragement is no longer encouragement. It's now pushing an athlete to go beyond and go to failure. That is not what coaching is all about. That is not world-class development of instruction to the point of excellence. Just like the Aristotle quote says, it's not habit It is excellence based on practice and processes that we put in place so that it becomes habits. That's what it's all about. And within that, we control it as the athlete. We support it as coaches. That's important for us to understand. I'm so grateful to be in this space, but I'm also so challenged and grateful for the challenge to be able to talk about change that will bring about performance that becomes habit for the betterment of the elite athlete. But at the same time, those elite athletes are exemplars now for what the right way is to be in control and manage your space in the best way you can for you. Glad to be here. It's a Friday on 11 o'clock on KUHSdenver.com, streaming to you every week at this time. 360 Performance brings to you those skills and methods that strategically help you to be the best you can be. And that when you're faced in the twisties, you have a strategy to manage that and deal with it in a way that fits you. And you can take ownership of it so that you are prepared before failure happens. And yet you can control it. Not denying the fact that failure and error will still be part of our routine, but that's what makes us better. That's what creates habits of excellence. It's great to be with you. Have a great day today. Enjoy the day your way. This is Laurel Whiteman, or Coach, saying goodbye to you and have a great weekend.